What's going on, everybody? Sam Shapiro back here with more of your Heat latest on FanArc. Definitely a wild episode today with the breaking news of Terry Rozier being arrested for being part of an FBI sports betting gambling probe. That's according to Shams as he reported that Thursday morning. And a lot to dive into regarding that whole situation. But before we get into that, please drop a like on this video, and thanks so much for subscribing and tuning into our videos every day for great daily content, all pertaining to Miami Heat Monday through Friday right here. Now, diving into the nitty-gritty regarding Rozier, he was arrested Thursday morning in Orlando by the FBI for being part of an FBI sports betting gambling probe. And basically, it's looking like, at least right now, that Rozier is going to be completely off of Miami's roster, and we're not going to see him suit up. His NBA career could possibly be over because of this entire investigation. Section 12 of the NBA CBA states that any player that's dismissed or disqualified for gambling violations is immediately banned for at least 1 year. And initially, the NBA said that Rozier did no wrongdoing in this investigation, but when you kind of look at the situation in the grand scheme of things, if the FBI makes an arrest regarding this whole investigation that's been ongoing for years, it's pretty likely the NBA I would assume, is going to ban him for at least the gambling violations for at least a year that he's being accused of, at least at this point in time. And basically what this means is his contract, gone. Deal, done, forget it, out the window, forget about it. It's null and void, no pay, no roster spot for the Heat with no appeal as well, at least for the next year. So if the league once again deems this is all accurate, they can pretty much automatically terminate Terry Rozier's deal with Miami, and the roughly $25 million that Rozier would be paid out, at least by the Heat, over this next year is completely out the window at this point. It's also kind of wild to see that Portland Trailblazers head coach Chauncey Billups was also arrested in this kind of whole scheme that kind of transpired Thursday, but he was charged with being involved in an illegal poker operation tied to the mafia. So definitely some crazy news that all went down Thursday morning. The FBI rather making two crazy arrests with Chauncey Billups and of course Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier for this sports betting gambling violation investigation that has kind of been following him around since it almost seems like 2023 at this point, when he was still in Charlotte. So basically what this means for Miami is, at least at this point in time, it seems like he's going to be removed from the roster, and Miami is going to have a lot more flexibility in terms of the cap space that they're going to have available now. Basically, if the arrest prompts the NBA to void Terry Rozier's contract, Miami's payroll would basically drop from $186 million, rounded out to $159 million, and that would give Miami really flexibility to use a lot more money in that regard. That being not only the money that would kind of come from the situation with Rozier, but it would give Miami the flexibility to use a $6.1 million trade exemption acquired in the Jimmy Butler trade that Miami could ultimately use to acquire a player or players earning up to $6.1 million before early February, right around the trade deadline. So this really gives Miami, honestly, a lot more financial flexibility to bring in another guy to fill that roster spot that is most likely going to be there now with the absence of Terry Rozier. And it also kind of begs the question, what's really next for Miami at this point? Who could be a potential solid candidate to replace Rozier in the roster, assuming that the NBA voids his contract and he is banned from the NBA at least over the next year at this point in time, which right now is seeming very likely considering the FBI making that arrest in Orlando Thursday. So it kind of begs the question, Miami could decide to revoke the conversations with Precious Achiuwa of coming back on board. Miami has voiced concerning, or not really concerning, but Miami has voiced wanting to bring back potentially Alec Burks for another year. Trey Lyles is definitely a solid another option for Miami to bring on. And I had mentioned that a reunion with Victor Oladipo for Miami could also be an interesting experiment as well, considering you're not really probably going to sign those guys for anywhere close to what Rozier was making over the course of this next year. So you could probably get away with acquiring one of those guys and saving a lot more money, being even more under that luxury tax line than you were before, because the money Miami was going to be paying for Rozier is now just not on the table. So financially, this is looking pretty solid for Miami, especially considering all summer long they were talking about not really having Rozier in the lineup in the grand scheme of things. So drop in the comments who you think Miami could potentially benefit in bringing in to replace Rozier amid the arrest news from the FBI in Rozier. Kind of just really unbelievable news. I still kind of can't believe this happened, and it really broke Thursday morning, just one game after Miami's regular season tipped off earlier this week. And that's kind of diving into the next segment I want to talk more about in this episode, that being Miami dropping their regular season opener to the Orlando Magic on Wednesday. They unfortunately fell in this game. It was a much closer game than I think a lot of people anticipated. Miami lost 125 to 121 on the road. And going into this game, they were definitely the underdogs, I believe sitting at under 8.5. But I just think that in the grand scheme of things, nobody would have kind of looked at this game and really thought, one, Miami was going to put up 110, 120 points on arguably one of the best defensive teams in the conference, if not the league, but one of the clear favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference this year that could really make a solid finals run when you look at the Magic, the Pistons, and the Knicks really being clear favorites. I don't really count the Cavaliers because I think they're regular season frauds, but I mean, some people might disagree with me there. But anyway, the fact that Miami was in this game for a good majority of it. They took the lead pretty promisingly in the third quarter and pretty much held it until about 6 or 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And quite honestly, this was just, I feel like we had seen this, especially in the preseason against the Hawks with the Heat, and this is something they kind of tended to do at least in the regular season last year as well. Like I said before, they took the lead in the third quarter, pretty much held it for the majority of the second half, and then they ultimately kind of got stagnant a little bit on offense. They gave up a lot of second chance rebounds, which turned into a lot of second chance points for the Magic. And it ultimately was a big reason why Miami really got outscored 21-10 in the final 6 minutes of the game. So when you kind of look at that and then you look at the overall spread, I mean, in this game, Miami, I believe, out-rebounded the Magic 47-46 in this game. So when you kind of look at that on paper, it's kind of like, you're kind of at least thinking to yourself, like, why was Miami not able to pull this game off? And as a Heat fan, this kind of frustrates me because there were a lot of exciting things to kind of take away from this game. The most notable, in my opinion, being Norman Powell really showing off that he's going to probably be the leading scorer for Miami, at least at this point in time until Tyler Herro comes back. He had 28 points in this game, and he shot 9 of 19, 4 of 8 from 3, was absolutely a baller in this game for Miami. And considering that they had a pretty strong second half, which I feel like in some of these preseason games, they'd come out and really didn't look all that strong coming into the third quarter. This was a big improvement, especially because of how they were trying to push the pace in this game. Granted, they had 25 points, I believe, off turnovers in this game, but they had a lot of guys off the bench that also played really well. Jaime Jaquez Jr. had a very solid game. Fontecchio looked pretty solid with 13 points to add in this matchup as well. And then Davion Mitchell pretty much looked like he picked up where he left off last season in this game, having 16 points in this game as well. So it's very frustrating because a lot of the pieces that I think Miami is trying to help develop in the grand scheme of things and helping kind of get in the win column are definitely showing signs that they're there and are putting Miami in the position to win these games. You just got to hold on for the last 5 minutes, man. For the love of God, come on. I mean, when I was looking at this, looking at the score and kind of how much time was left in the game, I believe Miami still had a 1-point lead with about 3 minutes left in the contest to go. So when you're that close with an Eastern Conference powerhouse, and they're one of the clear favorites to really go the distance this season, especially on the road, seeing that they put up over 120 points in this game and they still couldn't come up with a win really shows that not only they still got some kinks in the armor, I feel like, to work out, because ultimately they kind of handed this game to the Magic in a lot of ways. So I don't really necessarily know what Miami needs to do in terms of how they play in the first 3 quarters, but at least if they can button it up towards the end of the game, I think they can get over the hump in some of these games and win some of these games where they're not clearly the favorite. Drop in the comments what you guys think, because this was, in my opinion, a very disappointing loss considering how close Miami was, at least throughout the entirety of this contest. And it kind of begs the question, going into tonight's game against Memphis, what is Miami going to really have to do to replicate, how they were playing at least up until the last 6 or 5 minutes of the game against the Magic, against the Grizzlies? And I think the big takeaway in this game is going to be, how can Miami stop Ja Morant? This backcourt's going to look very interesting this year for Memphis without Desmond Bane, and with Ja Morant kind of coming back from, being absent last year. It's going to really, I think if Miami can put the clamps on him, they can ultimately really shut this Memphis team down. And if they continue to capitalize on pushing the pace while also finding ways to get back on defense, not allowing those crucial second chance rebounds to turn into second chance points, they can stay in the game and hold it even through those last couple of minutes in the fourth quarter. So I'm very curious to see how they're going to at least take some of the strengths from this game, utilizing the pieces that did pretty well in this past game against the Magic off the bench, carrying that over. I'm not surprised that Ware had limited minutes and wasn't really a major piece in this Miami contest because of the situation with his ankle, but I'm hoping that with more games under his belt, the durability kind of comes back and he can really kind of take shape into the type of player we at least saw in the preseason, where he was averaging at least 23 and 9 over or at least half of those 6 preseason games where Miami couldn't get in the win column. So I think the key is going to be putting the clamps on Morant, not letting him kind of take over the game and really push the ball in terms of where he wants to score, how he wants to score. And if they can force some easy turnovers on him while limiting their own turnovers, at least while pushing the pace, then I think this can be a recipe for success for Miami to get in the win column and at least be 500 going into this weekend. But we'll just kind of we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to just watch the game. But I think the big key is going to be forcing Ja Morant to take shots he's not comfortable taking. Forcing the ball out of his hands definitely could help with that as well. But I think also in terms of going back to pushing the pace, knowing when to get back on defense and when to be set is going to be a big thing in this matchup, because that's also why Miami, I feel like, gave a lot of points up to the Magic and gave them the opportunity to really come back in the final parts of this past game on Wednesday. So if they can kind of clean that up a little bit, but also continue to do what they did, at least offensively, with spreading the love, having a lot of these players continue to score in double figures, but also getting a guy like Jovic a little bit more involved, who I feel like kind of struggled in this game a little bit, definitely would play a factor. But I think also part of it needs to be Miami having some of the bigger guys at least on the floor at all times, because a big reason why Miami fell in the last 5 minutes of this game as well was because they were a little bit undersized against guys like Wagner, Paolo Brancecchio, and just it was just frustrating to see as a Miami Heat fan, because of the undersize also kind of playing a role into why these second chance rebounds were at least falling into the hands of the Magic. Miami was getting quality stops in this game. So ultimately, very frustrating, I think, as a Heat fan to see, and I'd like to see the team kind of clean up on that as they head into tonight's game against Memphis. But that's going to do it for today's episode of your Heat Latest here on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video, and of course, subscribe to our channel for more daily content all pertaining to Miami Heat Monday through Friday. Thanks so much for joining us on this Friday. I'm Sam Shapiro. Be sure to have a great weekend, folks.